High above the bald peak around which Warlord Karol's contingent was encamped, Ilishnish watched as the Stormcasters directed a dozen assistants to sweep the stone clear of snow and move supplies around their ritual site. Nearby, hunters from the Yeti army kept a watchful eye on the proceedings, but most of their energy went into scanning the jagged mountainside. They were still a problem, however. Ilishnish didn't doubt that they would start pelting her with rocks if she threatened their charges. "How long are we going to watch these people for?" Ilishnish grumbled. "This is taking far longer than a lizard man ritual back home." Far longer was a gross understatement. The lizardmen just sat in their little circle, cast their spells, and then got on with their lives. They even told her that ritual magic has been used in the past to rapidly deploy powerful elementals in war. The Yeti ritual, on the other hand, was far from rapid. They spent a whole lot of time organizing their space, etching lines into the stone, positioning various ceremonial items, chanting a bunch of nonsense, and praying over everything. And then they did more of it. She wasn't sure whether they had cast anything at all yet. "Is this some sort of political move?" Ilishnish asked, something that adds apparent value in the eyes of the uninitiated. "I've seen human priests do similar things." "It's possible," Pinecone said. "At the same time, this may simply be how they have learned to conduct ritual magic. Even if certain actions aren't necessary for spellcasting to some, it may become integral to others." Ilishnish glanced at the Krokonos flying over her shoulder. The explanation felt absurd to her, but she admittedly often witnessed what Pinecone had described. Priests called upon the name of one god or another before casting their spells, and wizards spouted overly dramatic gibberish before launching their attacks. Adventurers in training were often castigated for doing so, as it wasted precious seconds in combat, but many persisted nonetheless. "Wait," Ilishnish said, "does that mean we're going to be loitering here for however long it takes them to finish their ritual? Do you not wish to learn more about these people?" She held in a tired sigh. While learning about the world and its people was an ongoing thing for her, watching people cast magic was annoying. As an adult frost dragon, she was well past the point that she should have been able to cast magic of her own. No matter what she tried, however, she couldn't even grasp the most fundamental aspects of spellcasting. It had gotten to the point that she had stopped trying. Her only consolation was that she could perform spell songs, which was sort of like magic. As a bard, she could also cast magic through the use of scrolls, wands, and all manner of magic items, but the irony this ability presented annoyed her all the more. Ilishnish stifled a yawn as the droning chants of the Stormcasters drifted up through the wind. Maybe she would get some sort of bonus for collecting information about the Yeti solidarity. It wasn't exactly her assignment, after all. "We go," Voltava said from between her horns. "Huh?" Ilishnish blinked. "They're already done?" "They are still casting. The spell is an independently developed variety of weather control magic. I have to wonder how they came to possess the equivalent of 6th tier magic when the best they have down there is a 4th tier caster. Elements of culture and religion have allowed them to conceptualize their version of the spell. The lack of refinement suggests this magic is either a recent development or that blind adherence to tradition has stifled innovation. What evidence of magical integration did you see while you were among them?" "The vehicle I traveled in was thoroughly enchanted," Ilishnish replied. "As for the work camp, the temple was the only building that showed any signs of magic." "What of the people?" Pinecone asked. "Do they have a diverse range of casters? Personal magic items?" "There wasn't anything obviously magical," Ilishnish replied. "I didn't sense anything more valuable than it should have been, either. As for magic casters, I didn't notice any aside from members of the Yeti clergy. That suggests their religious caste is maintaining a monopoly on the use of magic. Across many societies throughout history, religious institutions often divide their resources between the maintenance of society and investing in monolithic projects that reinforce their primacy in the eyes of the people. Many also work to suppress threats to that primacy, such as what they consider unorthodox or heretical magic." She had no reason to question Pinecone's words. Of course, Most temple staff would probably describe what they were trying to achieve in more flattering terms. So what does all that mean for us in our current situation? Ilishnesh asked. That it's likely safe to descend, Pinecone answered. With their clerics busy conducting the ritual, the only potential threats are the nearby sentries. I see. Despite the late Overseer's claims of the Solidarity having an army with higher quality members, Warlord Karol's soldiers didn't seem that much better than the company security she had observed around the work camp. They were a bit stronger and their standardized equipment did give off an air of professionalism, but, at the same time, it wasn't as if they towered over their non-military peers in their apparent capabilities. If she were to make a comparison, the Warlord soldiers were a bit stronger than the average veteran Beastman warrior. But to be fair, she had no idea how large the entire Yeti army was, so she couldn't be sure what the bigger picture looked like. Ilishnesh slowly descended upon the ritual site, making wide circles as she inspected every nook and cranny of the landscape. The 6 Stormcasters each had a pair of acolytes. 3 pairs of hunters occupied points immediately surrounding the ritual circle, while several dozen more were scattered along the approaches below. Like the beastmen of Rolen Gork, they used leather slings and war pouches filled with stone bullets. The last part was something she wasn't particularly fond of. I'm the largest target between us, she said. They are going to pelt me with stones the moment they notice we're here. Greater Stoneskin. She ascended in alarm as a rocky layer enveloped her entire body. After a moment, she leveled out again after realizing it didn't add anything to her mass. Don't frighten me like that, Ilishnesh hissed. Shall I dispel the effect? Voltava asked. No, Ilishnesh hastily answered. I'm going to land now. Ilishnesh dove the final 3,000 meters to the peak, hoping to dislodge the unreasonable ball of fluff atop her head. All he did, however, was hop off and cast flight magic on himself, allowing for a slow, relaxed descent. The Yeti ritualists jumped in collective shock as Ilishnesh landed and revealed herself to them. Good evening, Ilishnesh bobbed her head. Stone Dragon. The lead Stormcaster bellowed over the wind, you have encroached upon the lands of the Solidarity. Why have you come? Stone Dragon? No, this isn't what it looks. Lee, never mind. Someone wishes to speak with you. Please hold on for a moment. The Stormcasters looked at her strangely, but they were perfectly content to give their escorts time to gather while Voltava took his sweet time floating down to address them. Someone snickered as the Chronos druid alighted atop her head. Your weather manipulation activities exceed the acceptable bounds of the natural balance, Voltava said in a high-pitched bleat. You will cease your actions immediately. One of the Stormcasters laughed uproariously. Puny morsel, she said, who are you two? A blood-curdling shriek pierced the air as the speaker spontaneously combusted. The aroma of burnt hair and melting fat filled the air as the Stormcaster chaotically waddled about, flailing her arms in panic. Some of the Yeti froze, expressions aghast, while others scampered out of the path of their burning comrade. Seconds later, the Stormcaster fell forward and crumbled into a pile of char near the edge of the ritual circle. Farther afield, the Warlord's forces rushed forward, howling in fury. The lead Stormcaster, however, held up a hand to call for silence. The jungle basin below has already crossed an unacceptable threshold, he said. Our seers have reported the transgressions of these savage beastmen to us. In their unthinking greed, they have facilitated the dominance of a single prey species to the detriment of all others. Through their efforts to maintain this unnatural state, they have forced the entire basin into a condition of systemic fragility. We are simply enacting a much-needed correction. This gross interference with the cycle of seasons is an inappropriate measure, Voltava told the Yeti. It does not specifically target the problem and threatens all species that dwell within the basin. You will permanently end your activities, or your activities will be brought to a permanent end. Well, that confrontation earlier today came back to bite him in the tail. The lead Stormcaster glanced over his shoulder at the gathering soldiers before glaring at Ilishnesh, or, rather, the thing arrogantly standing on top of Ilishnesh's head. Jola and the Stormcasters were throwing temple clout around just that afternoon, so the power dynamic that they had asserted was now putting their backs to the proverbial cliff. A sane person who valued their life would acquiesce to Vltava's demand, but doing so here would call the supremacy of the Yeti gods to question. Worse yet, Warlord Karol would surely see such an action as a sign of weakness and use the event to erode the influence of the temples on the Yeti frontier. At least that's what her experience with humans suggested. Indeed, her investigation of the Baharuth Empire's history revealed generations of political and sometimes military conflict between the martial aristocracy, their civilian counterparts, the temples, and the guilds. If it wasn't for the support of Fluda Paradine, who bought enough time for the Empire to entrench its core institutions, the Empire might have even fragmented into 5 or 6 petty kingdoms shortly after their rebellion against Riastais. Perhaps the solidarity was more stable than that in its developed regions, but the confrontation with the warlord earlier that day suggested that rule of law was tenuous at best on the Yeti frontier. "What are you waiting for?" Warlord Karol shouted, "Bring the wrath of the gods down upon these heathens. Freeze their hearts. Shatter their souls. Call down the avalanche to bury their bones." Fervent shouts rose from all around them, amplifying the warlord's sentiment. Had they faced similar challenges in the past? It would hardly be a surprise if they did. Druids existed pretty much everywhere in the wilderness. "Your answer?" Vltava asked. The Stormcasters raised their hands. Huge orbs of frost coalesced in the air and were sent crashing into Ilishnish. "Why me?" she cried. "Viral maximize magic, Inferno." Vltava bleated out an ominous-sounding spell. Then, Ilishnish realized that she was on fire. Hi-ee-ee-ee! Ilishnish leapt up in fright, flapping her wings and thrashing about as she tried to smother the flames. Along the way, she rolled over the ritual circle and lit the Stormcasters on fire as well. Their screams joined hers as chaos erupted and Vltava's awful spell spread to everyone who came into contact with anyone already set aflame. It took a good while for her to realize she wasn't taking any damage. Once she did, she turned a hurt look at the Krokonos floating overhead. "Must you be so atrocious?" Vltava yawned. All across the ritual site, scores of Yeti had been burnt to a crisp and many more were tracing fiery trails away from the peak. Ilishnish's fear-induced rampage had induced dragon fear in the Yeti contingent and a good number had dashed straight off of the mountainside to fall to their deaths. The only one who managed to get through everything unscathed was Warlord Karol, who stood frozen before them wearing a dumbfounded expression. "Return to your masters," Vltava bleated down from on high. "If they abuse their power again, far worse will befall your people." With that, the ball of fluff drifted away on the wind. Ilishnish folded her wings and settled them over her back before picking through the charred Yeti remains for anything of value. The overseer said something about these carved jade pieces being coins. "They certainly seem valuable, but what are they worth?" She looked over at Warlord Karol, who was still standing nearby in a daze. "Excuse me," Ilishnish said as she held up a coin on the tip of a claw, "what can one of these afford you in Rigel?" "Huh? Oh, 2 nights at a decent inn, including a meal wait. How do you know about Rigel?" Ilishnish took flight, heading off in Vltava's direction. The flooding in Roland Gork would recede with the cessation of the Yeti's activities, so his new worshippers would probably raise statues of him all over the place. "Where have you been?" Pinecone asked when she caught up to the Krokonos. "That should be my question," Ilishnish replied. "Why didn't you two come down with us? It wasn't necessary." "That may be so," Ilishnish grumbled, "but it would have been nice if one of you was lit on fire instead of me." Rather than dwell on the unpleasant experience, she went over a mental inventory of her gains as they descended into the jungle basin. Most of the Yeti's belongings had been destroyed or damaged, so she was left with a few dozen pieces of solidarity coinage and some magic items from the Stormcasters. Based on the Warlord's quote, it was a meager haul compared to collecting green dragon parts in Roland Gork. "Where are we going, by the way?" Ilishnish asked. "Back to Grokla?" "We did what we came to do," Vltava told her. We returned to what we were doing. That seemed fine, so long as what they were doing didn't bring them too close to the great loot. She didn't want a flight of blue dragons chasing her around, or, even worse, a brass dragon yakking at her until her scales curled up and fell off. It wasn't long until their flight brought them back over the jungle, where they alighted near an Osalo town carved into the side of a canyon. Their attention, however, wasn't focused on the town but on a group of nug herders tending to their livestock grazing alongside the churning river. The beastmen cast wary looks in their direction as they approached, but the defeated air that hung over them sapped away any threat they could muster. "Good evening," Ilishnish bobbed her head. "My name is Winter Moon. My companions and I were planning to stay the night in the town up ahead, but we couldn't help but notice that something seemed amiss. Is everyone all right here? Are the Yorgulans raiding nearby?" "It's the herds," one of the Osalo replied. "A malaise has fallen over them." "A malaise? What did your mystics say about it?" "There's nothing to be done," the Osalo sighed. "The wet has rotted away the pastures and hunger's weakened our animals. They're all sorts of sick and we're losing dozens every day." "Can't your mystics use magic to cure these maladies?" Ilishnish asked. The Osalo exchanged a look between themselves. "Does your kind not raise livestock?" one of them asked. "We are hunters, primarily," Ilishnish answered. "Ah. Then the answer to your question is that magic can cure your illness, but it won't prevent you from catching it again. We've tried separating healthy animals from sick ones and the healthy groups still eventually get sick. All we can do is see which animals recover on their own." "How many have done so?" "It's hard to say," a herder replied. "One might survive the hoof rot, but then the scalar tongue will get them. Or the jitters. Or the slime hide." "The mystics are asking us to pick out our best animals," another said. "I think they've decided to try and brute force a small herd through to next season with healing magic." "A lot of our people will have to go to the front," a third herder sighed. "Better to help take down our enemies and eat them than to sit here and wait for hunger to take us, I guess. We won't be able to get a meal here. I didn't get a chance to try some yeti, either." She parted with the herders on that sour thought and they opted to keep traveling downriver instead of staying the night at the town. The Krukonos stopped to speak with some of the people at each settlement along the way, finding that they were also facing similar issues with their herds. A few of them had even put in the effort to make their way from the flooded lowlands to find a bit of pasture, only to find that their precious animals would perish anyway. "It looks like the Yeti will ultimately get what they wanted," Ilishnish mused as they followed an orange clay road deeper into the valley. "Roland Gork will be too busy starving to resist them, and the mountain tribe stood no chance in the first place. The Yorgulans probably won't be very happy about millions of beastmen showing up to eat their invasion, though. This would have happened eventually," Pinecone said. "Simple systems are fragile. Roland Gork engineered its own downfall by becoming overdependent on Nug." "So this is what you intend to observe?" Ilishnish asked, "the death of a people?" "It is merely one of many cycles in the world. Fragile systems fail, while resilient ones thrive. Eventually, balance will reassert itself, leaving the survivors with the lessons of the past. In the case of Roland Gork, I would say it is a fortuitous event." "How can the collapse of one civilization be a fortuitous event?" "No," Vltava said. "Not fortuitous. What will come to pass is merely an element of the greater balance." "Now I'm really lost," Ilishnish said. "It matters little. What is, is." As they traveled through the night, Ilishnish idly wondered how Shork would react when she informed her that Roland Gork was in the process of getting ised. 12th day, Middle-earth month, 1 CE. Linksock, a cub was caught trying to sneak into the human district. "Again?" Shork scratched the back of her neck. "Please tell me nothing happened." The cub was returned to her home, but the humans grow increasingly worried over the safety of their own cubs. "Arg. Nothing's ever happened, right? Our security measures are fine." Of course, Shork had come to understand that humans didn't work like that. They were a woefully fragile race, and their children were even more so. What counted as friendly play between beastman children would probably result in dead human children. Even human adults could be grievously injured getting scratched or bitten by a beastman cub. As a result, seemingly everything was dangerous and a matter of grave concern to the human community. To top it all off, they had a near non-existent danger sense. They weren't aware of nearby threats unless they noticed them directly or were warned of them by someone or something else. It made humans especially crazy to deal with once they started believing in something that did or didn't exist. She often found that no amount of reasoning or reassurances short of doing what they thought would fix the issue would satisfy them at that point, and if their supposed solution didn't fix the issue, they would raise a fuss all over again. "I'll speak with Master Leeds later," Shulk said. "There must be something we can do to stop this from happening." The runner jogged off, leaving Shulk to address the other petitioners in her court. Most of the problems they brought before her were good problems, however, as most of the petitioners had come from outside of her expanding territory hoping to partake in the plan her people had set in motion to offset the disruptions caused by the floods. As for the floods themselves, they seemed to have leveled off. All of Roland Gork breathed a collective sigh of relief at that, but the fact of the matter was that it didn't erase all of the damage that had been caused. Some of the mystics even speculated that, by the time the flood waters fully receded, the rainy season would be upon them once again. They could only hope things returned to normal afterwards. Now, where was I? She blew a feather away from her nose as she scanned the assembled petitioners. So many people had come through her court that they were all starting to look the same. The petitioners silently waited for her to speak, none of them giving any hint as to whom she should next address. Irma Lamu. A grey-maned Irma rose with a gesture of greeting. "Elingsok," he said. "My lord and his council have reviewed your proposal. I am pleased to report that they find your terms satisfactory." "That's great." Shulk narrowed her eyes in delight. "Is your clan ready to begin immediately, or will they need time to prepare?" "Our industrial facilities can take shipments immediately," the Irma replied, "and our markets greatly anticipate the arrival of your manufactured goods." "What about the matter with our friends in the south?" Shulk asked. By friends in the south, she was referring to the Great Loot. Irma Lamu's holdings stretched to the border of the desert, and it was critical that they understood that their friends were no friends at all. "We have long known they are motivated purely by profit," Irma Lamu's representative answered, "but we weren't aware of the extent of their schemes. Rest assured, our clan has no desire to act as their unwitting agents. Perhaps one fortunate outcome of our present situation is that demand for imports from the south has very nearly collapsed. Our merchants will continue to escalate the narrative of our grim future prospects, but rumor has it that many merchants in the Great Loot have already cut their losses and abandoned the border trade." "Good," Shulk said. "The sooner we sever those unhealthy trade ties, the better. What about the warriors we requested? It may take us some time to provide what you need. Few chiefs will happily send their best warriors away from their lands even if they understand the reasoning behind it. This is especially the case with the wars raging on our borders already pulling away so many warbands. Korstorofi is a mere week via river from Lamu," Shulk noted. "It isn't as if we're sending them to the Draconic Kingdom or the Yorgulan front, indeed, and, as you've mentioned, it's an investment for the future of Roland Gork. But difficult times weigh otherwise straightforward choices with many worries. I humbly implore you to have patience for us on this matter, Elingsok." She wasn't sure if the Irma was doing it on purpose, but his resistance to the latter part of her proposal was tangible. At least to her. It wasn't as if throwing a tantrum in front of the representative would expedite things, however, so all she could do was swallow her disappointment. One of the common ideas between all of her foreign visitors was the notion that most countries outside of Roland Gork had capitals. While this was also true for the great clans of Roland Gork, what outsiders might mistake for the capital of Roland Gork as a whole was merely the place where all of the jungle's undesirables ended up. Trying to shake off that image and transform the city into a true capital was an ongoing challenge for her clan. The sheer number of beastmen dwelling in and around the city made it easy to turn it into an economic center. It was already that way long before Shork was born, though in a pretty random and informal way. Turning it into the political and cultural center of Roland Gork, however, was another thing entirely. Her greatest challenge by far was securing the cooperation of the warrior clans. She had hoped to lean on their pride by asking for their help to train the city security forces and had even gone so far as to offer generous compensation for their assistance. Unfortunately, something had gone wrong along the way and now they treated her like a merchant instead of the lord of a warrior clan. Luck will only get me so far, I guess. Of course, Shork replied to the representative. Your circumstances are entirely understandable. I was hoping that Irma Lamu would be able to show our Irma citizens how to carry themselves as true warriors, but my enthusiasm has perhaps led to unrealistic expectations. We will proceed with our trade arrangements and eagerly await your favorable response with the remainder. After a long evening receiving petitioners, Shork slipped off of her throne and went for a walk under the canopy to refresh herself. She nearly jumped out of her fur when Winter Moon hopped down from a branch nearby. Are you trying to make my whiskers fall out? Shork said. My apologies, Winter Moon said as she rose to her towering full height. I just arrived and it looked like you weren't busy. You were looking for me? Did something happen? I figured you'd still be out east. Did Nakira send a message? They appreciate the support that you sent them, but that wasn't what I came to talk to you about. Then what is it? Shork sat back on her haunches, wondering what the bard had to say. I'm not sure how to put it nicely, Winter Moon said, but it looks like Roland Gork is doomed. Huh? Shork nearly shouted as she shot to her feet. What do you mean? Is it the Yorgulans? I'm sure they'll contribute, Winter Moon said, but they aren't the main issue. A number of maladies have affected the herds upriver. The herders have tried separating sick animals from healthy ones to no avail. With how quickly the sickness is spreading, the mystics can only believe that it's being spread through the air or water, or perhaps some parasite that has been driven outside of their usual range by the irregular conditions. That's no good, Shork said. How many animals are they losing? From what I've managed to gather, only 1 in 50 managed to survive. Shork fell back onto her haunches. 1 in 50? They were all doomed. What do we do? She said in a small voice, my people worked so hard to survive everything so far. Was it all useless in the end? She needed the stone walkway anxiously as countless worries whirled through her mind. Despite all of the improvements and innovations Osalo Pakan had introduced to Roland Gork, they still relied on the herds for survival. If this pestilence swept through the basin, it would make the problems caused by the flooding look like nothing in comparison. But knowledge was not power. Knowing about something didn't mean one could do anything about it. I don't want it to end like this, Shork looked up at Winter Moon helplessly. I never thought things were going great, but I figured we could at least survive. Is there any way you could help us? Why, you've been to a lot of places, right? Maybe. Winter Moon's cool turquoise gaze didn't waver in the slightest as Shork fell apart. Everyone was going to die. She had been a fool to cruelly string her people along with hope after empty hope. Worse than a fool. Already, she could imagine all of Roland Gork cursing her as everyone perished. She flinched as Winter Moon released a disgusted sigh. I give up, the bard said. Shork cringed at Winter Moon's scathing words. Then, a massive claw snatched her off of her feet and spirited her away into the night. 19th day, Middle Wind Month, 345 Hick. Hey, Elena again. Another quiet day at the Imperial Archive. I guess endlessly transcribing records to the new format just sucks the energy out of everyone. How many generations will it be until we catch up? With everything that's happened in the last few centuries, I suppose it's to be expected. Everything's changed. It's a new world now. At least the world isn't burning down around our ears nowadays. The worst thing that's happened recently is the overnight wyvern deliveries from Abelian being delayed today for some reason. In other news, it's that time of year again. The regional Axis tournament is coming around and all my co-workers are trying to get me to join the qualifiers. I may win our games most of the time, but I'm not that good. There are mages who can literally move heaven and earth competing in that thing, and I wouldn't stand a chance. I'll still go and watch, though. Being the future empress has to have at least some perks. Maybe I could get an extra ticket for mother. Anyway, I need to spend some time with the baby before passing out. Until next time. Elena. MMH, this girl needs more excitement in her life, Leanne said. She evidently appreciates a peaceful existence, Clara replied. These memoirs wouldn't make for a very popular read. We should have Florine spice them up. Diaries usually aren't meant for public consumption, Clara said. Besides, there's plenty about her life that's interesting. I don't disagree, but popular is the key word here. She married the crown prince and her life's been completely normal since then. Why couldn't she have met him in a fateful encounter while he had amnesia? Where are all the other love interests? The evil love rivals with powerful, shady connections? Says our #1 candidate for evil love rival, Clara said. I'm not the evil love rival yet. Speaking of which, I'm going back down to see what all those eligible young bachelors are up to. Clara shook her head in silent disapproval. She and Ludmilla remained adamant that they were all too young for family life. It was a weird stance to have, considering one of them was now practically ageless. Leanne swung her legs off of the comfy chaise she had passed out on the previous night, rising as she brushed off her skirts. She spun in place twice, looking for the nearest mirror, idly searching for a comb in her infinite haversack. You know what would be great? Leanne said, some kind of magic item that kept our hair in one piece. We got clean items, our clothes are magical and don't get messed up, and we have damage reduction for, the other stuff. If we had a hair thingy, we'd never have to get ready for anything again. Never? I mean, we'd still change things up whenever we want to. Just talking about saving time, you know, with your trade network in the East, Clara said, shouldn't you be able to easily find something that suits your needs? You'd think that, Leanne replied, but it's weirdly hard. Humans are a tiny market out there. The last time I had one of my guys search for that kind of item, I ended up with some thingy that the seller claimed magically maintained a lustrous coat of fur. I was paranoid about butt hair for weeks after I tried it out. It works great on horses, though. I'm beginning to think that all of the conveniences that your workshops have implemented to your products were originally meant for something else. Maybe. It'd be a waste to throw them out, yeah? After fixing up her hair, she and Rose left Clara's apartments and descended to the second level of Castle Corlin. It was barely dawn, so the guests she could find were still appearing from their suites for breakfast in the balcony alcoves. A group of them rose to greet her as she approached the closest table. Countess Wagner, I hope the morning finds you well. Why are you offering a theocracy greeting? She supposed that it couldn't be helped. Nobles adapted quickly and Clara was considered the leader of her faction. Thus, all of their mannerisms had changed to match her southern customs. Mornin', Leanne replied. Are the kids sleeping in? They've gone for some fresh air in the gardens. We had quite a lot to take in yesterday. Was there anything in particular that interested you, my lord? The much-rumored infrastructure, of course. I can't keep count of the possibilities that it presents. If everyone can work together to create this new network that Countess Corlin proposed, well, I dare think that we'll wrest some control back from the crown. We can't wait until everyone gets up to date, Leanne smiled. Imperial economic activity will explode once everything's in place, and it can't come soon enough. The nobles at the table sat back down, leaning into their plush seats as they looked up at her. May we know what you mean by that, my lady? The Baharuth Empire's a rising power, isn't it? I don't think anyone believes that it'll just fade into obscurity after becoming a client state. The Imperial Army certainly doesn't. From what I've heard, the Expeditionary Army is almost ready to go again. There'll be opportunities galore once that happens, and you'll have the experience and resources to take advantage of them. Heads bobbed in agreement around the table. The imperial aristocracy was far from incompetent, but its members still perceived the world through the insular lens of the rural elite. With every new party of visitors, the idea that the empire was still going places was something that she and Clara had to constantly assert to get their guests on aggressive enough footing to get on board with their proposals. The effect of those assertions compounded, however, as rumors and spies between imperial factions were plentiful. As a result, Clara's movement for change in the empire gained momentum week by week. It had gotten to the point that the most recent groups of visitors came in already knowing what they wanted to see. Of course, that created its own set of challenges, but it was better than having them flee at the border. Speaking of challenges, after making her obligatory rounds of the breakfast tables, Leanne made her way to the front gardens. Several dozen scions had gathered, divided into their respective genders. The girls turned and curtsied in greeting as Leanne went to join them. "Good morning, Countess Wagner." "Mornin'." Leanne smiled brightly. "Looks like the boys wasted no time with, hitting each other with sticks." Across the garden from the girls, a group of boys and young men were gathered. They formed a rough square within which their members paired off against one another with practice swords. "It's a good thing they don't have access to the castle stables," one of the young noblewomen sniffed, "or they would have surely charged off to hunt." "No doubt," another noblewoman said. "Their lack of awareness beggars belief. Don't they understand what they're here for?" It seemed inevitable that the trade fair would also end up serving as a matchmaking venue. Entire factions were coming with their families in tow, after all. The entire setup in the garden was a conventional one, allowing girls and boys to get a glimpse of one another in a civil setting without their parents looming over their shoulders. That their hosts were a pair of gorgeous, wealthy, brilliant, influential, glamorous, powerful, and conspicuously single beautiful bachelorettes had each family make extra sure their sons were putting their best foot forward, which of course devolved into hitting each other with sticks. Not that the girls minded. No matter the airs they put on, the women's side was rife with calculating glances and evaluatory discussion as they watched the boys play on the other side. Even those who were already married or betrothed, pretty much everybody over 12, joined in on the discussion, competing over everything and anything. The boys would probably be shocked at how thoroughly every aspect of their existence was being dissected. "Imperial propaganda's been laying it on thick, yeah?" Leanne said. "I wouldn't be surprised if more than half of these guys went straight from the Imperial Academy to the Imperial Army." The girls' gazes went to one of the older of their number, a stereotypically blonde Imperial noblewoman who looked to be about the right age for an academy freshman. "You're probably not wrong, my lady," she said. "There are recruitment posters for the Imperial Army everywhere these days." "It will clean up the cities, at least," another girl said. "My Lord Father says that the upcoming campaign is going to be a bloody one. Everyone enlisting nowadays is hoping to win titles for themselves, but most of them are going to end up in a troll's cookpot. I don't want my fiancé to get eaten. Why are men so stupid?" A chorus of criticisms rose, drawing more than a few looks from across the garden. None of the visiting houses were from martial backgrounds, so the sentiment was unanimous. A proper lord husband administered their titles, took care of their families, and raised their house's prospects through politics, trade, and a healthy dose of intrigue. Running off to earn wealth and glory through feats of martial equestrianism was fantastical nonsense that belonged to a less civilized age. "At least the posters are nice," a girl said. "I got one of Lord Captain von Brennenthal before we left our winter." "What? But they just started posting those." "I want one too." Leanne pondered the duality of women as the discussion flipped right around. Would she be just as bad if she mentioned that she had spent 2 days giving Lord Captain von Brennenthal a personal tour in a personal carriage during the early days of the trade fair? "I can't not say it, right? I totally have to say it. I'm saying it." As she prepared herself to say it, something heavy struck her between the shoulder blades and sent her face first into the pavement. "Why?" Leanne croaked into the cobblestones. Screams filled the air and skirts fluttered around her as the gathered noblewomen fled. Heavy wing beats followed, sending the wind whipping through her hair. "Damn it, I just had that fixed." "Where are we?" an unfamiliar voice said from above her. "The front gardens of Castle Corlin," Dame Verulin's voice replied. "I recalled that they're holding a trade fair, so I figured the people here would be better equipped to assist you with your problems." Is that so?" What's a trade fair?" "I have no idea," Dame Verulin replied. Leanne pushed herself to her hands and knees, sending whatever was on her back tumbling off with a cry. She looked around to find a beastman cowering under a nearby hedge. For being so large, they sure could squeeze themselves into some pretty tight places. "Did you just dump a beastman on me?" Leanne scowled up at the frost dragon. "I introduced a valuable new customer to you," Dame Verulin replied. "You should be thankful." Admittedly, most merchants thought it would be nice if customers simply fell out of the sky, but she didn't think it meant literally. Maybe it did for flying races. Customer for what? Dame Verulin's gaze went to the beastman. The beastman stared back at them from under the hedge, her wide eyes glittering in the shadows. "Did you do something?" Leanne asked. "Me?" Dame Verulin answered, "Of course not." "Well, I technically did a few things, including flying over here. Anyway, this is, Countess?" "No, that's not quite right." "Princess?" Let's just call her Lady Shawk for now." "Sure, let's do that," Leanne said. "Where did Lady Shawk come from?" "From the shimmering palace of the water goddess," the frost dragon replied. That's just a rough translation. Humans are incapable of pronouncing the name of the city. Where have I heard that before? Oh, yeah, Queen Auriculus mentioned something like that. You mean to say she's from the place that attacked the Draconic Kingdom? I didn't attack anyone. Lady Shawk protested, "My people don't live anywhere close to the Draconic Kingdom." "Rolengork is a very large place," Dame Verulin told her. "The territory that Lady Shawk rules over is farther from Oriculon than Rantle is. Many beastmen from Rolengork indeed attempted to migrate westward recently, but, historically, only the clans bordering the Draconic Kingdom have been predating human populations." "I see. Wait, did you fly her straight from there?" "She wasn't busy," Dame Verulin replied. "Leanne, are you all right? A footman just came in claiming that a beastman fell out of the sky and flattened you." "Don't just flatten me like that. I can't afford to be any flatter. Anyway, Dame Verulin dropped some sort of beastman princess on me. It sounds like we've got a lot to cover, so, wait a second." Leanne took an inventory of her surroundings. The imperial noblewomen had scattered and fled. Across the garden, all that was left of the young nobleman were several weapons cast on the ground. She scratched them all off from her list of prospects. Members of Clara's household stood at their posts, watching her curiously. A patrol of elder liches had stopped to float above the garden, observing the proceedings with their dispassionate crimson gazes. Beside her, Rose stood by with a serene expression. Her shadow demon was nowhere to be seen. This has to be some sort of conspiracy. If Clara had been flattened by a beastman, everyone would have surely come running to her aid. "I guess I'll take her to the garden in the back." The Imperials bolted the second she appeared, so it'd be chaos if I brought her inside. "All right, I'll come out as soon as I'm done in here." Leanne took a deep breath, releasing a long sigh before turning to address their new guest with a smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Lady Shawk," she said. "My name is Leanne Loretta Dale Wagner, the Countess of Wagner. You'll have to forgive us for our improvised accommodations, we weren't aware that we would be receiving a guest from Rolengork." Lady Shawk finally crept out from under the hedge, brushing herself off as she rose to her full height. She was a full head taller than a Death Knight and looked every bit the killing machine that the stories made beastmen out to be. "So, Leanne said as she led them around the palace. How was your trip? Unexpected, Lady Shawk replied. Unexpected? I was walking around last night and, winter moon, the dragon grabbed me. Leanne looked over her shoulder at Dame Verilyn. You abducted a princess. I guess all those stories about dragons turned out to be true. I didn't abduct her, Dame Verilyn said. She asked for help. Her people are going to die soon. Huh? A starvation. So you figured they could buy food from us, Leanne said. Yes, that's right, Dame Verilyn replied. Could their trade fleet handle something like that? The beastmen used river barges as well, so it was possible. How many people are we talking about feeding here? Leanne asked. 20 million, maybe? Lady Shawk said. Both Dame Verilyn and Lady Shawk shied away as Leanne rounded on them with a frown. Unless it's 20 million ants, she said, we don't have enough meat lying around for that. What gave you the idea that we have that kind of capacity? It's not as if I've seen you ship meat before, Dame Verilyn said defensively, then turned to Lady Shawk. Let's go back. Your doom awaits. Wait. Lady Shawk cried, we'll take anything we can get. It's better than nothing. Leanne pondered the beastmen's plight. They meant to expand their operations into Rolengork eventually, but it wasn't supposed to be for a while yet. Their fledgling shipbuilding industry was still trying to catch up with demand as it was. I'm sure we'll be able to sell you something, Leanne said. Just don't expect anything crazy. We'd appreciate anything that you can spare, Lady Shawk said. How much is this appreciation worth? Leanne asked. Now, Clara said as she joined them in the staff gardens. Let's not let avarice get in the way of good judgment. Behind Clara came a line of household servants, each bearing a piece of furniture, a pile of texts, or a tray bearing various refreshments. Lady Shawk retreated to a nearby bush as they prepared a gazebo for their discussion, trying to watch everything that was going on. Is it all right to ditch our other guests like this? Leanne asked. We won't be able to get anything done until their excitement over your demise dies down, Clara answered. This is the last batch before the harvest, so we can afford to extend things for a day or two. Kai, did you have any idea that this was going to happen? No, I was just as surprised as you were. I somehow doubt that, Leanne muttered. Anyway, the kitty in the bush over there is Lady Shawk. She's a countess or princess or something. Dame Verilyn couldn't decide. It's not that I couldn't decide, the frost dragon poked her head between them. Her title definitively exists, but I doubt the translation would be accurate. The evolution of Rolengork's hierarchy differs from that of the humans in the area. She's something like a tribal monarch or the head of a mini-confederation of tribes and clans, depending on how one looks at it. I see, Clara said. Well, we can set the nuances aside for the time being. My name is Clara Odelia Dale Corlin, the Countess of Corlin. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Lady Shawk. The beastman stepped forward and bobbed her head in a vaguely human gesture. Hello. So you're both human lords? Yes, that's right, Clara replied. It's hard to tell when you're all the same size. Aren't lords supposed to be bigger than everyone else? Not that I'm questioning you. I understand why you might believe that, Clara said, but lords of humanoid races don't grow larger than average like the lords of demi-human races often do. So, might I ask as to what I owe the pleasure of our meeting today, Lady Shawk? It's because she's doomed, Dame Verilyn said. It's because she's doomed, said Leanne. You are doomed? Clara tilted her head curiously. I'm doomed, Lady Shawk sighed. But I'd like for us to become a little bit less doomed if that makes any sense. We've been struggling with flooding for months and now a plague is sweeping through our herds. My people need food or they won't survive. How much food do you need? Clara asked. Too much, Leanne said. As in try again in 50 years too much. Based on the Royal Army's observations on how long it took beastmen to starve during the Draconic Kingdom campaign, they would need a fleet 40 times the size of what they currently had to feed Roland Gork. That aside, the entire region didn't produce enough meat to feed an additional 20 million beastmen in the first place. Maybe not all 20 million, but, Let's not waste time discussing what is and isn't possible, Clara said. This may take a few weeks, but we should be able to dedicate at least one barge's worth of food for regular deliveries. Assuming you can afford it, Leanne said. As expected, Clara had noticed as well. Lady Albedo would be ecstatic if they could pull things off. Clara bid everyone take a seat at the gazebo, though Dame Verilyn seemed content to remain as she was. You mentioned something about flooding, Leanne said. Is that what's making your herd sick? Or is it something that came with the floods? Roland Gork floods every year, Lady Shawk said, but these floods are months out of season. Even long after the deluge ended, the river kept rising. Everyone's animals couldn't graze the lowlands this year. Our herders were already culling their herds because there wasn't enough fodder for all of them. Would your herd's chances to survive this plague, or whatever it is, improve if they had access to decent fodder? The herders were already wary of weakened animals getting sick, Lady Shawk replied, so I think so. What do these herds of yours eat? Leanne asked. Around this time of year, Lady Shawk answered, they eat the plants that grow in the lowlands. It's mostly grass, aquatic plants, and shrubs. They'll pretty much eat any plants that aren't poisonous. In that case, Leanne said, selling fodder might be more effective than shipping meat. If we can get your herds healthy enough to resist this plague, it may not be as big of a catastrophe as it seems. I'm willing to try anything that might help, Lady Shawk said. We've been culling animals for months, though. It'll be years until the herds grow large enough to sustain us again. This deal keeps getting sweeter and sweeter. Leanne glanced at Clara, but her friend betrayed nothing through her pleasantly neutral mask. The Sorceress Kingdom produced so much fodder as a byproduct of its agricultural activities that people had resorted to burning it for fuel. With their undead-powered logistics, they could sell the stuff for next to free and still run a profit, not that they would sell it to next for free. We can send some your way and see how it goes, Leanne said. What do you intend to export in return? Lady Shawk looked over at Dame Verilyn. I'm not paying, the Frost Dragon said. That's not what I meant. Lady Shawk said, I don't know what anything is worth around here. You know, this Overlord's probably just as bad as Ludmilla at trading. Clara didn't reply, instead producing a sheet of paper and placing it on the table between them. Lady Shawk leaned forward as Clara started constructing a reference table. Clara's pen paused as she looked up at the Overlord. Are there any languages that you can read, Lady Shawk? Clara asked. She understands Low Draconic, Dame Verilyn said. She does? Leanne frowned. That hadn't been included in any of the Royal Army's reports. According to them, any documents that they found in the invaders' possession amounted to crude inventories and letters of credit that were little more than collections of primitive pictographs. We'll use Low Draconic, then, Clara said. What we're doing now is constructing a table of goods to help us figure out what sort of trades are possible between your people and ours. To begin with, what are the most common commodities for export in your markets? Stuff from our nug herds, Lady Shawk replied. Meat, leather, horn, bone, that sort of thing. What's a nug? Leanne asked. They are basically jungle nook, Dame Verilyn answered. Nook as in the magical beasts? That's right. What other commodities can your people export? Clara asked. Lady Shawk gestured at her garb, which resembled a kind of loose robe with additional layers draped atop it. We have jute, she answered. It's not usually as fancy as this, but everyone uses it. Also, there's our woodcraft. Honestly, if I knew I was going to be doing this, I would have asked Master Leeds to put something together. Who's Master Leeds? Leanne asked. The guildmaster of our merchant guild branch. You have a merchant guild? In response, the Overlord took the leather satchel slung across her shoulder and placed it on her lap. She rummaged through it for a few moments before producing a parchment stamped with an all-too-familiar seal. Leanne's brows drew together as she examined the document. The hell? This is the seal of the Rivergarden Merchant Guild, Clara murmured. It's standard Merchant Guild paperwork, too. It would have been one thing if one of the invaders had taken the seal as loot, but it was another thing entirely for them to start using Merchant Guild paperwork. So, how did the Rivergarden Merchant Guild end up in your territory? Leanne asked. We bought it, Lady Shawk answered. Huh? We went to see what the Draconic Kingdom was like before the deluge this year, the Overlord said. It seemed like a waste for them to just get eaten, so we bought Master Leeds, his staff, and a bunch of humans from Rivergarden by the Guildmaster's recommendation. This keeps getting weirder and weirder. So you went to visit the Draconic Kingdom, Leanne said, looked around, and then somehow enslaved the Rivergarden Merchant Guild. Then you brought them back to wherever you came from. Kostorifikeral, Lady Shawk said. Warha? Sorry, can't pronounce that. Anyway, now there are a bunch of humans living in Roland Gork and a merchant guild spawned as a result. I guess? Is there something wrong with that? Nope. Nothing at all. Happens all the time. Lady Shawk's eyes grew wide. Really? She asked. Clara cleared her throat. Shall we get back to the topic at hand? Are there any other goods of note that your people can spare for export? Those are all the big ones, I think, Lady Shawk replied. My people are pretty simple. They might have been simple, but they produced some high-demand goods and their market was huge. If what the Overlord said was true, Roland Gork might be the richest country in the region because half of everything was made out of magical beast parts. Everything about this is too good to be true. There must be a catch. What about the salt trade? Dame Verilyn asked. What about it? Lady Shawk asked back. It stopped, right? The Frost Dragon said, doesn't that mean you're not exporting goods to the south anymore? Oh, yeah. I guess that means we have precious metals and gemstones to trade as well. Nice catch, Leanne said. Why thank you, Lady Wagner, Dame Verilyn replied. Clara's pen scratched against the paper on the table as she added the information. As their assessment of the situation and its potential solutions went on, Leanne folded her hands in front of her, trying her damnedest to keep a silly grin from breaking through her mask of composure. My lady, Tyre said softly from behind Clara, it appears that our other guests have settled down. All right, Clara said as she rose to her feet. I believe I've collected more than enough information to begin conducting queries on your behalf, Lady Shawk. I'm not sure how long or far you've traveled to speak to us, but, if you would like to rest, you're free to use these gardens or we can have a room prepared for you. If you aren't feeling tired, Dame Verilyn can show you around the town. Why me? Dame Verilyn asked. I could use a nap, Lady Shawk said. How long will it be until you have some idea of how much you can send us? We have fodder in storage, Clara said, so that shouldn't take more than a day or so to ship out. As for the meat, fully loading a barge within 2 weeks is probably optimistic, but it shouldn't take more than a month. A month? If I may ask, how tight are things back at home? Leanne took a step back as the Overlord's massive paw came up to scratch the back of her spotted neck. The people in the lowlands, that's where the majority live, were already in big trouble before we found out about this plague, Lady Shawk said. I don't know how fast this pestilence is traveling downriver, so all I can say is the sooner imports start arriving, the better. Your concerns are understandable, Clara nodded. Please rest assured that Countess Wagner and I will waste no time leveraging our trade contacts to redirect what you require. We'll resume our talks this evening, but, before I go, was there anything else you'd like to add? Just one more thing, Lady Shawk shifted slightly in her seat. I never intended to hide this from you, but there didn't seem to be a good time to bring it up. The Draconic Kingdom is the only way that I know of to get to Roland Gork and it's been overrun by the undead. I'm not even sure if trade is possible between us. She didn't tell her. Leanne glanced at Dame Verilyn, but the Frost Dragon hadn't reacted in any way to the Osalo Lord's admission. "That's grim news indeed," Clara replied with a grave expression, "but I believe we'll be able to manage." On their way back inside, the silly grin that Leanne had been holding back throughout the meeting finally broke out on her face. "This is going to be the biggest market disruption since the Demon Gods. Assuming we can muster the throughput to facilitate it. We have a lot of work ahead of us if we don't want this chance to slip through our grasp." "I doubt it will. Lady Albedo will stop at nothing to make it happen. It's going to push the schedule ahead by half a decade or more." Leanne wiped the smile off of her face as they rejoined their imperial guests. Chaos loomed on the horizon, and it was going to be glorious.